All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hello. My name is Dr. Don Parker, and I'm leading this session. I'm excited to be here at Eastern Illinois University. This session is entitled Building Relationships with At-Risk Students. And just to give you guys just a really brief history about myself, I started off as a PE teacher and a health teacher, teaching in Chicago public schools. And after doing that for about 6 years, I became a dean of students at a high school. And after doing that and just noticing the impact that educators have on students' lives, I continued to go ahead and get my doctorate degree in educational leadership. My dissertation was on how to build relationships with at-risk students. So the way I started this journey is I just looked forward to being a teacher, a PE teacher. Remember when we were down in the keynote session, they talked about what teacher really changed your life or what teacher do you really remember? My PE teachers had a great influence because they weren't interested in me only as a student, but they were interested in my life and how I was developing socially and emotionally. So that impact that they had on me, they said, hey, you know what, Don, I noticed that you're really good in sports and you're really good at showing other students how to play sports and teaching them the rules of the game and things like that, because I was very athletic growing up. So they noticed that talent in me. So they said, when you go and graduate from high school, you should consider studying PE and physical education in college. I said, that's a great idea. So that's what I did. So I was very eager to begin my career as a PE teacher. But when I first got the job in Chicago Public Schools being a PE teacher, I met the principal. He interviewed me. He said, you're perfect for this position. You play high school and college sports. You can also teach several sports here at the school. He was like, I can't wait for you to get started. So he handed me my schedule. So I looked at the schedule, and it said first period health, second period health, third period plan, fourth period health, fifth period health, and seventh period health. So I looked at him. I said, I thought you were interested in me teaching sports and being active. I'm looking forward to being in the gym and teaching the sports. He said, well, there's one thing I forgot to tell you. All right, and this is me being 22 years old. He looked at me and said, it's something that's called seniority, and you're the lowest on the totem pole. So all the other teachers, they don't want to teach health because they don't want to grade papers and they don't want to prepare lesson plans, so here you are, you have all the health classes. But teaching those health classes really started to give me a sense of appreciation for what those health classes were designed to do with that health curriculum, because I was teaching a lot about life skills. So my students would come to me often, they would say, hey, Coach Parker, I really appreciate that lesson on self-esteem. I went home, I made a list of the 10 things I like about myself the most, and I started thinking about the talents that I have, and it started helping me appreciate me more for who I am. Or they say, hey, Coach Parker, I really appreciate that lesson we did on grief, because I lost my abuela or my grandmother, and now instead of thinking about how much I'm going to miss her or how much the pain hurts, I can reflect now on the good times we had together, on the lessons that she taught me that I can carry on, and just carry on her legacy and remember her for who she was and the impact she had on my life. Or they'll say, hey, Coach Parker, I really appreciate that lesson on peer pressure because, you taught us some really good refusal skills. And when I went to the party this weekend, people were trying to get me to drink alcohol and smoke marijuana, but I was able to say no and have my friends respect my boundaries and say it in a way where I wouldn't lose their friendship. So when they started saying that, they started feeling a passion inside me, and I really appreciated the lessons that I was teaching them and what they were taking from it, because they said it had a positive impact on their lives, and they were able to use those skills that we talked about in class. So then I became a dean of students, and being a dean of students, I worked with what they call that 10%. In schools, they say 10% of the kids make 90% of the problems. So basically, you have 10% of the students that are always getting in trouble or always causing some type of problems or having some type of issues in school, either being disrespectful to teachers or being insubordinate to teachers or starting fights, things of that nature. They were just disruptive to the teaching and learning process. So after doing that for a few years, I noticed myself just getting very impatient with the students because it was like being on a treadmill. You're working with the same students over and over again and continue to get in trouble. And I guess the best way I can say this is if anybody is familiar with the Bible figure called Paul. All right, before Paul was Paul, he was Saul, and he persecuted the Christians. But then one day, as he was walking down the street, just a miraculous thing occurred, and He said, hey, Paul. It was like Jesus talking to Paul. He said, why do you persecute me? And then he just saw the light. Literally, he saw the light. And he changed, and then his name changed from Saul to Paul, and he became one of the greatest advocates for Christianity. So that's the analogy that I used when I was a dean of students. After I did my dissertation the dissertation was titled, How do you keep at-risk students from getting repeated behavior referrals? How do you reduce the recidivism of getting behavior referrals? And they tell you not to take bias into study because you're not supposed to take a bias into the study. But I did, because I always felt like, hey, if we're just continuing to give these students a slap on the wrist or, not be hard on them, they're never going to learn a lesson. So that was my bias going into it. But after I did the research showed me that the best form of reducing the behaviors of at-risk students is by authoritative counseling, and then by building relationships with them. So I saw the light. I said, I have to change the way that I go about working with these at-risk students. Instead of getting frustrated and angry and disappointed that they're not meeting my expectations, I have to take more of a patient approach to working with them as they try to navigate their way through high school and try to learn these social and emotional behaviors. So with this workshop and working with at-risk students, this is going to be an interactive session that we have here. It's not just going to be me sitting here talking to you, because I know you guys have been sitting and doing a lot of listening today. So I'm going to make this very interactive. So feel free to share any comments, thoughts, or experiences that you have, and then feel free to participate in the activities that we're going to do today. But this is the definition of a word. If you guys can read that definition, and I'll read it out loud, and tell me if you can tell me what word that is the definition for. A desire of some good accompanied with an expectation of obtaining it, or a belief that it is obtainable, an expectation of something which is thought to be desirable, confidence, pleasing expectancy.
Hope.
Yes, that's hope. We're going to start this conversation with the word hope, and we're going to end it with the word hope. So, I had the opportunity to attend a leadership conference. And there was a man by the name of Phil Towns. And he was a riverboat tour guide at the Grand Canyon. So his job was basically to take the tourists who signed up for the excursion from one part of the island or one part of the canyon to the other part of the canyon and just show them and give them a tour of the Grand Canyon. However, on this particular day, the weather was bad, the water was real choppy, the winds were pretty high, and he told the group, he said, we've explored this part of the canyon for the half of the day. And normally, around this time of the day, we would go across the river and we would explore this other side of the canyon. However, the weather is real choppy. We have to get in this boat. We have to navigate through these wavy waters. And I just want to know if you guys are comfortable going across the river to navigate the other side of the canyon. And the group agreed unanimously to go across the river to explore the other side of the canyon. So he was a little worried because the waters were very choppy. And he had these people's safety, it was his responsibility. So they got in the boat and they went across the river. As they were halfway across the river, the winds picked up, the rain started, and the boat got real rocky in that water. One man happened to fall out of the boat who wasn't wearing a life jacket. Phil had to act very swiftly. So he acted very swiftly. He jumped in the water, and the people on the boat helped tow him back to the boat and pull the man in. And the man was visibly shaken for the entire ride back to the other side of the canyon. So when they got to the other side of the canyon, they gave Phil a huge round of applause. And the man was visibly shaking. He was saying, hey, Phil, I just really want to thank you. I want to express my gratitude towards you. I feel like I owe you my life because you saved my life, because I can't swim. And I know you just you put all your personal safety aside. You jumped right in to get me. I really want to repay you. And so Phil said, people offer me tips all the time, and I appreciate the tips because I don't make a lot of money doing this job. But I really want to know, how can I be wealthy like people like you who come and take this excursion and take expensive vacations? I would like to build a better life for myself and for my family. So the man said, you know what? What I'll do is I'll take you under my wing for 6 months to a year. I'm a stockbroker, and I love doing investments and mutual funds and things like that. If you can come to New York with me, if it's okay with your family, I will teach you everything I know about the stock market. So he took him up on this offer. He went to New York with him, and he learned everything about the stock market. 5 years later, Phil Town is now a millionaire. And the moral to this story is, if you give a man a fish, you teach him for a day. You feed him for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Raise your hand if you're familiar with that saying. So Phil was able to create this new life and become a millionaire. And he's the author of a New York Times bestseller book, and it's called The Number One Rule: Never Lose Money. That was the number one rule that he learned from the stock market investor, is to never lose money. And the number 2 rule is never lose money. All right, but the point is, when we work with at-risk students, we have to give them skills for a lifetime, because they're going to go through crisis situations, and they're going to go through situations that they're going to experience again in life. They're going to go through those rocky waters. They're going to have to learn how to navigate through that. So students who are at risk of dropping out due to serious social and emotional problems, they come from difficult backgrounds, and they're at risk of dropping out of school because they have so many social problems. That's the basic definition of at-risk students. But if we dive a little bit deeper into the research, there are like 3 levels of at-risk students. The first one being the epidemiological model. And I'm going to go through this pretty swiftly, because normally when I do this presentation, I do it in a 6-hour time frame, but we only have 50 minutes here. So we're going to run through it fairly quickly, but I just want to get you familiar with some of the research and working with at-risk students. So the epidemiological model was the first model that came out when the researchers started looking at these at-risk students and saying, how can we help these at-risk students be successful in school? So they did a research on the at-risk students, and they said, you know what, from what we found, the conclusion and results of our research shows us that these students have something wrong with them. Either there's something wrong with them mentally, or there's something wrong with them physically, which makes them at risk for not being able to finish school. So several years later, researchers continued to look at this, because the epidemiological model put all the onus on the students. So then they did more research, and they said, okay, here's a school of thought from the social constructivist people who did the research. They said, we can't just put all the onus on the at-risk students and make it all their fault. We have to look at things that we're doing that can help the at-risk students be successful. So the social constructivist said, yes, there's a lot of legitimacy to your argument and to your research. However, we feel like there's some things that we can do different at the schools in order to help at-risk students. So a quick example, when I first became Dean of Students, we had a very high suspension rate. And we said, wow, we have a very high suspension rate, and we also have a very high rate of verbal altercations and fights in our building. What does this due to? We looked at other schools, and we found that they used to have high discipline rates and high discipline referrals and fights and things like that. But we looked at their data had dropped dramatically. The negative behaviors had decreased. And we looked at what they did, we went to their school, we visited them, and this is when block scheduling was very popular. So block scheduling is where you only go to like 2 or 3 classes a day for an extended period of time, as opposed to going to 6 or 7 classes in one day. So they said, you know, we were just like you guys, but we found out that our fights and arguments and verbal altercations and things like that, they didn't happen in the classrooms, they happened in the hallways, they happened in the cafeteria. So we cut our lunch times down from an hour to 30 minutes, and we do our block scheduling. Instead of going to 7 or 8 different classes, that means they're in the hallway 7 to 8 opportunities to have fights and arguments. So now they only have 3 or 4 times in the hallways, and they have less opportunities to have those altercations and fights. So that's just a quick example of a social constructivist solution to a problem. They did something on their end to improve the student behavior, improve the environment to make it less likely for students to fail. And they also had high suspension rates. Those suspension rates decreased because they implemented an in-school suspension program. So instead of suspending students out of school, they would issue more Saturday detentions and do more in-school suspensions, and that kept their suspension numbers low, but the students were still held accountable for doing what they were supposed to do. Now, the ecological model is the point that I'll talk from today. They gave both models credence. They said, we have to go a step further, though. We have to not only look at the students' interaction in school, the school environment, we have to look at the students' interaction in the environment in which they live. So the ecological model, if you break down the word, eco meaning life, ology meaning study of. They studied the student's life and how the student interacts in his environment, not only at school, but also in the community, at home, and things that they do. And so they said once you can look at the student's overall life and their environment at school, home, and in community, now you can look to see what some of these issues are, and you can get to the root of the problem, as opposed to just seeing what behaviors you see in school. We can see what is the student really up against in his life, in his community, at home. What is he really experiencing? And then once you figure out what that student is really experiencing, now you can start applying interventions in order to help that student, to help them be more successful. So, how many people in the room are teachers or administrators? Counselors. Okay. How many people in the room work with children on any level or plan to work with children on any level? Okay, great. So what I want you to do with your shoulder partner or at your group is just list some of the characteristics that you see of at-risk students. All right, and you can have a quick discussion with yourselves. We'll take about 2 minutes and just jot down maybe 3 or 4 characteristics that you see from at-risk students. So, where to go?
I'm in elementary, and then I have middle school.
Wow. How about you?
Elementary, I have middle school, math, science.
When do you guys go?
I'll be down in Detroit. I'm from Lafayette, I can get to school, so I'll be around Lafayette area. Yeah, it's not really apathetic because I can look at it as
We're all in this whole group right here today, and we're doing our student teaching for the whole year. Yeah, you can choose to do the whole year or just one time. We're already out.
Come on, man.
I'm on third degree Steve.
Does that help? Okay, we'll take another 20 seconds to conclude our conversations.
I can't do it. I think granted, I work with a different population. You know, all one of my students are high.
Okay, in 3, 2, 1. All right, now I will go around the room, just ask, just random groups, what are some of the characteristics that they see with at-risk students while they work with them. We'll start here at the front of the room.
One of ours, we said, was they're kind of resigned to their fate. They feel like it's not really apathetic, but why bother because this is as good as it's gonna get.
Sure, okay. And how about from this side of the room? What are 1 or 2 characteristics that you guys see from at-risk students?
A lot of them are removed, just not engaged in class. A lot of my students in particular, it's their immediate parents are not involved in their lives at all, so they live with either an aunt and uncle, grandparents, someone else from the family, but their parents are not involved in their lives at all.
Okay.
That's one thing specific to my students that I see.
Sure, great. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, sir.
I don't know how to define like a characteristic. Like to me, that's not a characteristic. So I couldn't come up with any specific characteristic to describe average students.
Okay.
I said define, and then I don't like that. I don't. That's not true. I don't think so. I couldn't. I said that, but I don't think that that's true.
Okay. And how about the back of the room?
One of the things we talked about is they're like reluctant to do their work. They're gonna like do anything they can to avoid it.
Mhm.
In their life.
Sure. Oh, we'll go here, and then we'll go there.
We said misunderstood, and we also heard persons who, you put their disciplines, kind of what he said, but math.
Lack of discipline. Sure. How about you?
Yes, and I was totally agreeing with them because I used to teach what you call at-risk children, but I don't call them at risk, I call them at promise children, because I believe all children can learn, but you just have to find out the base of the problem. But a lot of them they don't learn is because when they act out is because they don't know. And so when you find out that they don't know, and you pull them to themselves, and you talk to them and get them to trust you,
Sure.
then you can help them.
And that's what this is all about. And I'm glad that you guys are sharing what you see when you work with at-risk students. And that's a very great term you use, at promise, because as educators, anyone who work with students, you know, we have a duty to take them from that path of at-risk and put them on that path of promise. So that's what we want to do, is curb those negative behaviors and increase those positive behaviors. But it sounds like you guys have been reading the same books that I've been reading, researching the same articles, because this is what the characteristics of at-risk students are based on the research and based on people who study at-risk students. A lot of them suffer from substance abuse. You said they didn't want to do their work, so they underachieve academically. Like the young lady said here at the front of the room, they don't see the point. That's called having a catastrophic worldview. They feel like, you know, no matter how much English you teach them or how much math you teach them, it's not going to matter, because at the end of the day, they're going to go home, and they feel like a lot of students have a mentality they're going to die at a young age or end up in jail just based on what they see in their communities, or they won't be successful, or they just end up, you know, working a non-meaningful job from their perspective. That's what they perceive. So that's why education doesn't seem to be a priority to them. Academically challenged, they come from disruptive families, meaning maybe single-parent households. A lot of them have foster parents, just not a strong family unit where they're learning values and character development. They lack in that area. They have poor communication. They don't know how to say their feelings. And that's why this conference is good, because it's about social and emotional learning. They have to gain some emotional intelligence so they can express themselves and learn how to problem solve without always just getting frustrated and then doing a negative behavior. They suffer a lot from loss and separation. And then there's a saying that says, birds of a feather flock together, or get in where you can fit in. So at-risk students, they also connect with other disenfranchised students. So you see them seek out other students that are like them, because they want to fit in somewhere. Some interpersonal and psychological characteristics. A lot of them suffer from poor self-image, anger, loneliness, impulsivity, and depression. And since we're talking about bullying, this whole conference is DVC, preventing bullying, a lot of at-risk students can sometimes feel bullied, and that can lead to psychological damage. And that's why it's very important that we recognize these characteristics so we can be aware when there's a need to take action. This early identification is so key in working with at-risk students. So the study said that there are students in America, and their level of risk is determined by how many characteristics that they have, which we just spoke about. So from the research, it says that 10% are very high risk. And what that means is that they suffer from about 6 of those characteristics, if they're very high risk. If they're high risk, they probably suffer from about 4 or 5 of those characteristics. If you do an ecological study, you study their life, and you see the kind of characteristics they have when they did this ecological study, they were able to take 6 characteristics and identify them with the student. So they said he's very high risk. If they saw 4 or 5 characteristics that we just listed on the PowerPoint, then they said that student is high risk. If they had about 2 or 3 of those characteristics, they were considered to be moderate risk. And then 50% were low risk or no risk at all, meaning they didn't have many of those characteristics. And if they did see one of those characteristics, it was probably a temporary thing, a crisis situation, or something that they can work through and bounce back. So that's how you determine the level of risk the at-risk students are, is based off how many of those characteristics those students have. Okay, you guys with me on that? All right, now, students are at risk. They're at risk of what? They're at risk of dropping out of school. Students in a handful of big city schools have less than a 50-50 chance of graduating with their peers. And this was a study that was done by USA Today. And what they found is that 78% of whites graduate from school, 79% of Asians graduate from high school, and then we start talking about more minority populations. 52% of blacks graduate, 57% of Hispanics graduate. And those are very low numbers for graduate. So that's why it's so important that we find methods and strategies that work with at-risk students to prevent them from dropping out of school and help them be successful, not only in a school setting, but also in life. And then here's a cartoon. This is a depiction of a high school graduation, and this is the superintendent and the principal on the stage. And the cartoon says, "Sure, we lose some, but who's counting?" And the reason they put out that cartoon is because the dropout rate in America just wasn't getting a lot of attention. So they want to bring more attention to this, to say, hey, this is a real problem that we have to start addressing because it's affecting society in a negative way. When students can't graduate high school and become productive members of society, that's a problem. So we have to start using some strategies and interventions and start doing some things a little bit different in school to help more of these students be successful. Now, according to Willard, he did a research study. He found that students need more of a personal relationship with someone in authority if they're going to be successful in school. And so for most of us, we had either our parents who were really holding us accountable for high expectations, or we had teachers and administrators who held us accountable for high expectations. And some of us had just very good personal relationships with our teachers or with our administrators in school. And so with that being said, we had that factor that helped us be successful in school. Or you had that personal intrinsic motivation where you just knew that you were going to be successful, you're going to work hard because you just have something in you that motivates you to do well. Well, sometimes that's a trait that a lot of at-risk students do not have. So to help balance that out, we have to have personal relationships with at-risk students to help them be successful if they don't have that natural motivation. So it's not necessarily broken families that cause delinquency, but it's the broken bonds. So right at that very significant part of my life, when I was 15 years old, my mom and dad went through a divorce. And so now that's one of the characteristics that I can have from at-risk students. Now I have a disruptive family. So having that disruptive family could have been very tumultuous for me because my family was breaking apart. However, my father and I, we kept a good relationship. He stayed in touch. He always made sure that he came to check up on me and my brothers and sisters. So fortunately for me, I didn't have that bond that was broken. I didn't have that trust broken because I was able to maintain a healthy, strong relationship with my father, even though he wasn't out the house. However, at-risk students, they might not be as fortunate to maintain those positive relationships that they have. So here's a quick video clip that we're going to watch. And what you're going to see is a person who is at risk because he was in the he was in the Navy. And this is a movie clip from the movie Antwone Fisher. Raise your hand if you've seen that movie, Antwone Fisher. All right, this movie is about basically Denzel Washington, who's a counselor in the movie. And he's counseling this young man who is at risk for dropping out of the Navy because he really couldn't control his anger. He had an anger management problem. So you're going to see here how Denzel Washington had formed a relationship with him, but he was telling the young man that the relationship had to come to an end because the young man had to move on. And then you're going to see how he reacts as a result of this bond being broken or a threat to this bond being broken. Can you guys see the screen? Good? Okay.
You know, he's graduating from his Japanese class. So he wants me to come to be with you.
What'd you tell him?
I told him that I would be honored, Jerome.
Okay. Okay.
Congratulations. Petty Officer Fisher. Good job.
Thank you, Commander.
I was waiting. Cheryl, right? How you doing? Cheryl? It's a pleasure to meet you. Heard nothing but good things about you.
Where's your wife?
She couldn't make it. Sends along her congratulations. Small gift for you.
Okay. The philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome. Is there somewhere we can talk in private?
You mind?
That's fine. I don't mind.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Hello?
What's up, Doc?
How are you?
I'm good.
Yes, you are, Antoine. You're good. Hearing nothing but good things from your CO. Hear that you're getting along very well with your shipmates. I'm proud of you.
Thank you, sir.
Have you thought any more about finding your family?
I don't know, for what?
No, I just think that there's really nothing more important than that, Antoine.
What are you trying to say, sir?
That I'm proud of you, that I think you've come a long way.
Okay. You said that. What's wrong?
There's nothing wrong. You understand, this is very difficult for me. Our sessions have ended. Now, listen, just listen to me. I'm taking the liberty.
What do you mean they ended?
And son, it's time for you to move on. You can't stall here.
You and me are working out my problems.
You can't work
You
out.
told me that we need to figure out my
Listen
problems.
to me. Hey, get out! Get out!
Please, everybody's always leaving me.
Bro, people move on. You've grown. It's time for you to move on.
My mother left me.
I
My
understand-
father.
I understand.
Jesse and you.
Jesse, what do you mean?
We should have never gone. That's what. Jesse.
Jesse, tell me.
Cowbells ringing him up.
Cowbells. Tell me about the cowbells. What happened to Jesse, Antoine?
Stay away from me. Nobody's taking anything else away from you no more.
Okay, so like I said, this is a very interactive workshop, and I encourage you guys to participate. So, based on the conversation that we've been having so far in this room, what do you guys interpret from that movie clip? Why was Antoine so hurt?
Everybody leaves being left by another person.
Everybody leaves him being left by another person. I see your hand go up in the back. Okay, so you guys see how he didn't want to be left like that again. He didn't want the relationship to be broken. All right, this is midway through the movie, because early in the movie, him and Denzel Washington actually had a pretty good relationship going, and it took a long time, however, for Denzel Washington to establish this relationship with him. But eventually, he was able to break down the barrier that Antwone Fisher put up. So Antwone Fisher opened himself up to the process of having conversations with Denzel Washington and discussing his problems and things like that. And Denzel Washington was able to counsel him through a lot of problems. And now at this point in the movie, he fears that Denzel is going to leave him. And that's why he has such an emotional breakdown, because he feared that this relationship was going to be broken. And he was mad at himself for making himself vulnerable to have a relationship with an adult, because in the past he had been hurt over and over and over again by adults. All right, an analogy for it is if anybody has been in a serious relationship and that relationship just didn't go the way you wanted to go, and it had to end in maybe a breakup. For a time, you need some time to heal from that breakup, because maybe you were heartbroken or maybe your feelings got really hurt. So it takes time for you to open yourself up to a new relationship. And some people don't for a long time. All right, so this is what Denzel Washington was. He had so many breakups. He had, at first, early in the movie, refused to open up to have relationships. And now he's looking back on the situation saying, I never should have let this person close to me because he left me.
But don't you think that students feel that too, as they travel from school to school? They develop relationships at let's say middle school, then they go to high school, and those people that they develop the relationships with are not there to support them the same way. I think never really thought about it in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
Just now I'm thinking it's tough to know who that trusted adult is once you move on.
All right, you're absolutely right. And they say all good things must come to an end, all right? But really, it's more of a transition. When you transition from one setting to another setting, you have to expect that you may not be able to be in touch with a person as much as you was in the past. However, you're going to build new relationships and look forward to building relationships with people who are going to help you progress through life. So thank you for making that point. So angry and defiant children have a long, unpleasant history and experiences with adults. All right, their emotional memories tells them, you know, I can't trust this person, or I don't trust this person. So when a lot of people experience failure in building relationships with at-risk students because they say, hey, you know, you can just trust me, you can trust me. But trust has to be earned. It has to be developed over a period of time. And students are not going to trust you just because you're a teacher or just because you're an administrator. So I have another clip that I took from the movie Freedom Writers. Raise your hand if you saw the movie Freedom Writers. All right, great movie about a young teacher who went into an at-risk student population, and she had the burden of teaching them, or I should say she had the privilege of teaching them. However, she had the burden of getting them on the same page with her so she can engage them in teaching and learning. But like you said, a lot of them, they didn't value their education because they had that catastrophic worldview. So this next clip is just going to show you how a lot of at-risk students feel when you work with at-risk students. All right, I will give a public service announcement or a disclaimer before we watch this clip. There's a little bit of language in the clip and some racial undertones. But I always say before I show this clip that I believe they're good teachers from every ethnicity and background and sex and gender, sexual orientation. Because if you want to talk about somebody who's had a diverse group of teachers, it's me. All the way from kindergarten, all the way through my doctorate degree. I've had so many different teachers, diverse, multicultural teachers from different ethnicities and things like that. And I can say that there are some very effective teachers. And no matter what race, gender, sexual orientation that you are, I just want to encourage you that everyone has the power to build relationships with at-risk students and be effective with them. All right, so this next clip is going to show you why some students just don't embrace respecting their teacher right away or trusting their teacher right away. And I will warn you, like I said, there's a little bit of language, but are we all comfortable with showing the clip? Okay.
Talent, don't you think? You know something? I saw a picture just like this once in a museum. Only it wasn't a black man. It was a Jewish man. And instead of the big lips, he had a really big nose, like a rat's nose. But he wasn't just one particular Jewish man. This was a drawing of all Jews. And these drawings were put in the newspapers by the most famous gang in history. You think you know all about gangs? You're amateurs. This gang would put you all to shame. And they started out poor and angry, and everybody looked down on them until one man decided to give them some pride, an identity, and somebody to blame. Take over neighborhoods? That's nothing compared to them. They took over countries. And you want to know how? They just wiped out everybody else. Yeah, they wiped out everybody they didn't like, and everybody they blamed for their life being hard. And one of the ways they did it was by doing this. See, they'd print pictures like this in the newspapers. Jewish people with big, long noses. Blacks with big, fat lips. They'd also publish scientific evidence that proved Jews and blacks were the lowest form of human species. Jews and blacks were more like animals. And because they were just like animals, it didn't really matter whether they lived or died. In fact, life would be a whole lot better if they were all dead. That's how a Holocaust happens. And that's what you all think of each other.
You don't know nothing, homegirl.
No, I don't, Marcus, so why don't you explain it to me?
I ain't explaining shit to you. So you eat all we live.
We was here first, man.
All right. So what you're saying is, if the Latinos weren't here, or the Cambodians, or the blacks, or the whites, or whoever they are, if they weren't here, everything would be better for you, isn't that right? Right. It starts with a drawing like this. And then some kid dies in a drive-by, never even knowing what hit him. You don't know nothing. You don't know the pain we feel. You don't know what we gotta do. You got no respect for how we living. You gotta sit here teaching us this grammar shit, and then we gotta go out there again. And what are you telling me about that, huh? What are you doing in here that makes a goddamn difference in my life? You don't feel respected. Is that what you're saying, Ava? Well, maybe you're not. But to get respect, you have to give it.
That's bullshit.
What?
Why should I give my respect to you? Because you're a teacher? I don't know you. How do I know you're not a liar standing up there? How do I know you're not a bad person standing up there? I'm not just gonna give you my respect because you're called a teacher.
White people always wanting their respect.
Okay, so we'll stop it there. So, what do we see from that clip as far as what we've been talking about so far today, as far as just building trust and gaining respect from students, especially students, in particular, the at-risk students? Sure.
She kind of, instead of like letting it be negative, she kind of like turned it and like tried to educate them and to make them like to relate to their world. So I kind of like her, you know.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And how about from the student's point of view? What did you guys see from the student's point of view? We have already identified that they have a catastrophic worldview. We identified how education, they don't value it because they feel like it would not make a difference in their lives. What else do we see from the student's point of view?
Like you had said, that they're not just gonna give you respect because you're an authority figure. Maybe they won't give you respect because you're an authority figure and they have a bad experience with that in the past, so it's something that you have to earn from them as well.
You're absolutely right. You have to earn it.
And I think too, if you build a relationship and actually give some personal details about your life to your students, they know a little bit more about you and they'll respect you a little more. And that's how you could build a relationship to try in these situations, trying to amend everything.
You're absolutely right. And that's not just with students, but that's with people in general, is you want to learn more about them and you want to share some things about yourself to share with them. And then you notice, hey, we have more in common than we initially thought. Now, when I was teaching in the master's program for National Louis University, one of the textbooks for our course was called Unequal Childhoods. All right, in this book, you can pass that around, it's written by Annette Leroux. They did an ecological study of at-risk students from suburban settings and at-risk students from urban settings. And she came up with two terms. One term was called natural growth, and one term was called cultivated growth. Now, what cultivated growth is, who in this room likes gardening? Or what men in this room like keeping a nice lawn to make sure that the lawn looks good and the grass is nice and fluffy and things like that? Okay? That's cultivation. You have to attend to that garden. You have to attend to the lawn to make sure it strives, to make sure that those plants are healthy, to make sure that that grass is fertilized and that it's strong and has strong turf. All right, what she found from suburban students is that their parents took them to very structured programs. And when they did the study, they studied the students' lives. They said, hey, the mom is taking them to piano lessons, the dad is taking them to karate class or soccer, but they're in constant contact with an adult or an authority figure who's teaching them something. So they don't have a hard time building relationships with adults because they're always interacting with adults. However, when they looked at the students' lives from urban settings, they gave them the term natural growth. If you think of natural growth, you think about a lot, or you think about a forest preserve, where just weeds and dandelions growing everywhere. Nobody is really tending to the grass or to the field. All right, these kids grow up naturally. They're not in structured programs. They're on the block playing hide and go seek, playing tag, or just going to the park and playing basketball. They're not in structured settings. They don't have interactions with adults. So with that being said, they weren't accustomed to discipline. They weren't accustomed to structure. Therefore, when they had to have relationships with authority figures, they weren't used to that. All right, because they were always free to do what they wanted to do. So that's just a quick term from Annette Leroux for the story she did. It's called Unequal Childhoods, where she studied students from suburban settings and students from settings of natural growth. So I want to give you guys a strategy real quick on how to get to the root of the problem, and then we'll watch one more video clip as we conclude. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is a very interactive thing. And it doesn't take a long time, but it does require you to be a little bit sincere. So this question on the PowerPoint says, complete the following sentence. The thing I'm most afraid of, or what I fear the most is. All right, so what you're going to do real quick is just write down one thing that bothers you, or something that you're kind of worried about in the back of your head. Just write it on a small sheet of paper, and then you're gonna tear it off and fold it into a small sheet of paper. If you would complete that sentence for me, what is the one thing that you may fear the most? Like I said, this is interactive, it's hands-on. For all the students in here who are majoring in education, all right, you have to make sure that your lessons are engaging and hands-on, and that the students can participate, and that they're not just sitting listening to you lecture. They call that a stage on the stage. When the teacher may sit up there and just lecture and talk, and take for granted that the students like hands-on activities and how much work it takes to get students engaged in your lessons. Yes, ma'am?
Is this like related to what we're talking about, or just your thing that you're most afraid of in life?
In life, yes, life in general. All right, don't get too personal, but just something that sometimes things linger in the back of your head that you kind of worry about. All right, we'll take about 20 more seconds to just jot down.
I think we
3 o'clock?
or shortly before, probably
4:03, we have to be at the next one.
probably 10,
All right.
between 10 till 5.
Hustle. So,
Oops, no, that was from the previous.
okay, I'm going to come around and collect these in a bag really swiftly. Okay. Thank you. Are you ready? Okay. All right, now I'm going to come to the back of the room and collect yours.
One thing, right? We have to decide Did you prepare the shape for this section too? I think it.
They all say 3:30 is not.
Oh, it's not?
They all
You
have
got
said
it.
3:30. But they, he just said he's never in a few minutes. But all the signs out there said 3:30.
Okay.
Now,
We
here you
just
go.
have to get back to ISU.
You. You. And hopefully you did not get the same one that someone gave you. I mean, that you gave me, right?
That's funny, I don't know.
No.
Now,
It's just one more.
I'm gonna model how this works because I really believe in modeling just to make sure that people can really learn. You have to model. And you guys know that who's in education is before you expect the students to be able to do something, you have to demonstrate how to do it, model how to do it. All right? And then another trick that you just noticed is called managing classroom procedures. I wish it was a more efficient way to do it, but I did it as quick as I can so I can increase time on task and, you know, make sure that I'm not losing instructional time as I
We're glad you
do
have all
this
that
activity.
vocabulary in
Absolutely.
place.
All right, so this person wrote, all right, now here's what we're doing. We are taking what's on the surface, but we're going to dig down deeper because this is called getting to the root of the problem. So we have to take what a person says, but then look beyond what they say to see if we can get to the true meaning of what they fear or what they are trying to say. And this is just in conversations working with at-risk students that I found to be very effective through my studies and through my practice. So this person wrote, "The thing that I'm afraid of is my future money." Okay, so that's what they wrote. But if I look deeper into what the problem is, and there's no right or wrong answers, but this is just us putting on our counseling hat and just trying to look deeper into what this person may really be fearing. So if they think about, they're worried, they're afraid about their future money. So when I read this, I'm thinking, okay, I know there's a lot of college students in the room, and for the people who are not college students, maybe people are getting ready to retire if somebody wrote this. But a college student is thinking, hey, I graduate in a couple months here, and I can't go back home with mommy and daddy. They don't want me at home living with them. And I have to make sure I can manage my money and I can get my own place and live on my own. That's something that they worry about. That's something that they fear. Another person who may be ready to retire, they may say to themselves, you know, it's time to retire. I don't know if I manage my money right in the past. I don't know if I have enough to survive on. All right, they're worried about future money. So that's probably what their true fear is that they want to figure out how they're going to sustain themselves, you know, in the future. All right, so that's probably what maybe their true feelings are that they're not saying. All right, now, how do we do this? Next, when you find out what an at-risk student may really be fearing that's holding him back from being successful, we have to give him guidance to help him navigate past those feelings of fear. So if I was working with at-risk students and I was talking with him, I would say, you know, here's some tips and strategies. We talked about life lessons, right? Life skills, okay? Well, you have to talk to somebody about how to make a budget, talk about how to save your money, how to use your money wisely, and you have to let them know, hey, you know, you may not be able to live that same lifestyle that you're accustomed to living in the past. However, you can build toward that, you can work toward that if you're smart with your money and smart with your decisions. Because it's going to take some sacrifice, but what you have to do is have a list of priorities, have things that you have to make sure that your money can do for you before you spend your money lavishly and try to get things that you want instead of things that you need. And eventually, you can find ways to make more money to sustain yourself. And if it was a person who was worried about retirement and things like that, and you have to really tell them, hey, maybe you can meet with a financial advisor, or maybe you could look at what you can do after you retire, something that you enjoy doing, where you can continue to earn money, or maybe you can look at some investments that you can have to make up for some of the money that you think you might lose. But you would have to give them some type of guidance or give them the next steps so they can navigate through those feelings. Okay, so what you're going to do real quick with your shoulder partner is just you're going to read what they wrote, and you're going to do this. You're going to say what the person wrote, you're going to say what you think they're feeling, and you're going to say what advice that you were giving them. And we'll take about just 2 minutes to do that. So you talk with your partner and learn the skill.
Obviously, maybe they're just scared of not living a full life. And I guess my advice would be to take the time while you can to think about what you love. That type of advice. Take time for yourself and make sure it's not. I know, right? Thank you so much.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
we have to
Good
cut
luck.
off.
No, I understand. Good luck. Good luck on your teaching.
Thank you.
Hey, and if I can help you get driving CPS, absolutely.
I'll write it down.
It's on the last page of the PowerPoint.
Sure.
It is.
And I'll send you an email for sure.
And what's your name again?
Joe Powers.
All right, Joe.
Nice to meet you.
All right, now, as these evaluations come around, we've been talking a lot about, in all the sessions I've been in, we've been talking a lot about social and emotional learning, and that key word that keeps coming up is empathy. So in my workshop that I do when I do my Administrators Academy called Building Relationships with At-Risk Students, I spend a whole section on empathy because I know how important it is. So in conclusion, we're going to watch this clip. And if you need to ask questions, I'll be around. But I just want to conclude with this clip I said we're going to start this conversation with the word hope, and we're going to end it with hope too. So listen for this word hope as it comes up in this movie clip. It just shows you how teachers can make a difference in students' lives.
Guys, listen up. This is what I want you to do. I want each of you to step forward and take one of these Borders bags, which contain the 4 books we're going to read this semester. All right. They're very special books, and they each remind me in some way of each of you. But before you take the books, I want you to take one of these glasses of sparkling cider, and I want each of you to make a toast. We're each gonna make a toast for change. And what that means is, from this moment on, every voice that told you you can't is silenced. Every reason that tells you things will never change disappears. And the person you were before this moment, that person's turn is over. Now it's your turn. Okay? Okay. You ready to get this party going on? What? What's the deal?
Man, I have a boyfriend since I was like 11, you know?
I believe you.
Okay, well, I was always the person that was gonna get pregnant before I turned 16 and drop out. Like my mom. Ain't gonna happen.
Nobody ever listens to a teenager. Everybody thinks you should be happy just because you're young. And they don't see the wars that we fight every single day. And one day my war will end. And I will not die. And I will not tolerate abuse from anyone. I am strong.
My mom's kicked me out when I got jumped into the gang life. But I like her to see me graduate. I like to be 18.
Miss G, can I read something from my diary?
That'd be great. Who's he?
Man, he's been with us since freshman year, fool.
What's that?
The summer was the worst summer in my short 14 years of life. It all started with a phone call. My mother was crying and begging, asking for more time, as if she were gasping for her last breath of air. She held me as tight as she could and cried. Her tears hit my shirt like bullets and told me we were being evicted. She kept apologizing to me. I thought I have no home. I should have asked for something less expensive at Christmas. On the morning of the eviction, a hard knock on the door woke me up. The sheriff was there to do his job. I looked up at the sky, waiting for something to happen. My mother has no family to lean on, no money coming in. Why bother coming to school or getting good grades if I'm homeless? The bus stops in front of the school. I feel like throwing up. I'm wearing clothes from last year, some old shoes and no new haircut. I kept thinking I'd get laughed at. Instead, I'm greeted by a couple of friends who were in my English class last year. And it hits me, Mrs. Gerwell, my crazy English teacher from last year, is the only person that made me think of hope. Talking with friends about last year's English and our trips, I began to feel better. I received my schedule and the first teacher is Mrs. Gerwell in room 203. I walk into the room and feel as though all the problems in life are not so important anymore. I am home.
like the student in this clip said that the teacher gave him hope. You guys have the power to build relationships with at-risk students and give them hope. Never underestimate your power working with students. And thank you for attending this session. If you want further information, there's my contact information. Please feel free to contact me. And thank you guys, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.